I was standing in my driveway, jaw nearly on the pavement, as two middle-aged HOA goons tried to slap cuffs on my uncle, like they were reenacting some low-budget episode of Neighborhood Watch, the Power Trip edition. Only problem? My uncle isn't just some guy. He's the county sheriff. And the kicker? His radio was wide open. His entire department was listening in and waiting. Yeah, things went sideways real fast. Now, you're probably wondering how two random HOA board members thought it was a good idea to detain a fully sworn law enforcement officer on his own land. Believe me, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it too. The short version? A toxic mix of HOA ego and Olympic-level delusion. The long version? Buckle up, because this slow-burning mess has been building for months. Cedar Grove Estates had always been a model of suburban order. Rows of identical houses, meticulously trimmed lawns, and a neighborhood where every deviation from the norm was policed by a strict homeowners association. It was in this environment that Karen the Enforcer Miller had carved out a reputation. A woman in her late 40s with steel in her eyes, Karen was known for her unwavering commitment to rules, even if they were arbitrary. Armed with a clipboard and a cell phone, she roamed Cedar Grove as if she were the self-appointed guardian of perfection, watching for any sign of disorder. On the outskirts of Cedar Grove lived my family. We had a sprawling property that, while modest compared to the manicured lawns of the neighborhood, had a charm and authenticity that couldn't be captured by cookie-cutter aesthetics. My uncle, a rugged veteran of life with a quick wit and a deep sense of duty, stood as the heart and soul of our family's legacy. He had served the county in law enforcement for decades and carried the title of county sheriff with a combination of pride and humility. He was a man who had seen it all and handled every situation with a calm authority, one that was impossible to fake. Our family land was a sanctuary of real, lived-in values, freedom, integrity, and a dash of rebellious spirit. While many in Cedar Grove conformed to Karen's rigid vision of suburban perfection, we celebrated our individuality. I had grown up listening to Uncle Jack stories, tales from the front lines of county policing, where honesty, bravery, and a willingness to stand up against tyranny were the order of the day. Yet, in this polished neighborhood, even a legend like Uncle Jack was not immune to petty violations in the eyes of the HOA, for reasons that always seemed trivial to those of us who valued real life. Karen and her cronies found any behavior outside of their narrow guidelines intolerable. It was only a matter of time before their obsession with order led them to cross a line that would pit their misguided authority against the enduring legacy of a true public servant. It all began when Karen's simmering resentment against any hint of nonconformity reached a boiling point. Misinterpreting Uncle Jack's relaxed manner and open-door policy as loitering, she took it upon herself to protect the neighborhood for what she deemed an unacceptable disturbance. That day, without any warning or legal basis, two fake HOA officers arrived at our property, their expressions a mixture of self-importance and unearned authority. What they didn't realize was that they were about to face a storm they couldn't control. It all started on an unusually warm autumn afternoon. While the leaves turned fiery red and gold across Cedar Grove, the HOA had been busy tightening its grip on community standards. Karen Miller had been sending out stern notices and fines like confetti at a parade. Over the past few months, she had zeroed in on every infraction: how long someone's car was parked, the height of a flower bed, even how many people gathered on sidewalks. I'd heard whispers among the neighbors, rumors that Karen was setting her sights on our family property, claiming that Uncle Jack's relaxed, community-oriented approach amounted to loitering. It wasn't that he was causing trouble. He was simply being himself, welcoming an occasional chat, lending a hand, or sitting back on his porch with a newspaper as he observed the world go by. But in Karen's eyes, that was enough to disrupt the immaculate order of Cedar Grove Estates. When the day came that those fake HOA officers marched up to our driveway, I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I watched, incredulous, as they approached Uncle Jack, who had just stepped out to water his garden, unaware of the unfolding drama. They attempted to cuff him, their hands clumsily trying to assert control, while his calm gaze told a story of decades spent upholding the law and protecting the people. I could see the shock on the faces of the officers as a voice boomed from the open window of the patrol car. Uncle Jack's radio crackled with the voices of his fellow officers, ready to intervene. In that moment, the absurdity of it all became crystal clear. Two misguided HOA stooges, fueled by petty delusions of authority, had chosen the wrong target. Fueled by outrage, I immediately retrieved the camera on my phone and began recording the encounter. I captured every moment. Uncle Jack's steady rebuke of the fake officers, his measured instructions for them to stand down, and the incredulous confusion on the faces of the would-be enforcers. I documented his calm, authoritative tone as he explained that he was not only a private citizen, but the county sheriff, someone with the power and the responsibility to protect the public, backed by an entire department of professionals. The footage I gathered soon went viral within our community. Neighbors began sharing it on social media, their comments filled with a mixture of shock and admiration. Hashtags like #SheriffStandUp and #NoMoreKaren started trending, and the digital backlash against Karen Miller was swift. For the first time in years, the oppressed residents of Cedar Grove Estates were united in the belief that personal freedom and the right to live without arbitrary interference were paramount. Karen, of course, tried to defend her actions in interviews and official statements, claiming that she was protecting the community and enforcing rules for the greater good. But her claims rapidly fell apart in the face of overwhelming digital evidence and Uncle Jack's unyielding reputation as a fair and just law enforcement officer. My recordings, along with statements from local police and testimonials from shocked residents, made it clear that her actions were nothing more than an abuse of power. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly to compile a complete dossier of the incident, gathering support from neighbors and even reaching out to local advocacy groups. I organized a community meeting where residents shared their own grievances about the HOA's draconian practices and rallied behind Uncle Jack's example. It was clear that this incident wasn't just about one wrongful arrest attempt. It was about the broader issue of unchecked authority and the right of every individual to live freely. As pressure mounted, rumors began to circulate that Karen was planning to escalate her tactics even further. Some said she would issue more fines, while others predicted she might even try to force additional enforcement measures against those who dared to deviate from her vision of perfection. The situation had reached a boiling point, and it was evident that decisive action was imminent. The digital dossier, the viral video, and the mounting support from the community all indicated that a turning point was near, one that would force the HOA board to confront the consequences of Karen's overzealous behavior once and for all. In the immediate wake of the attempted arrest, Cedar Grove was abuzz with activity. Social media exploded with reactions as video clips of Uncle Jack's defiant stand were shared, commented on, and reposted by hundreds, even thousands, of residents. Hashtags such as #SheriffStandUp, #NoMoreKaren, and #PropertyRightsNow trended locally, and the digital community rallied behind the incident. People who had long felt marginalized by the HOA's rigid enforcement finally found a voice, and the collective outcry grew louder by the hour. Local news outlets quickly picked up the story. Reporters descended on our neighborhood, capturing the chaos outside my family's home and interviewing residents who expressed incredulous support for Uncle Jack. "I've never seen anything like it," one reporter noted, "when a county sheriff is treated like a common criminal by our own HOA enforcers." The narrative shifted rapidly from a petty dispute to a full-blown conversation about authority, community rights, and the dangers of allowing amateur rule enforcers to wield unchecked power. Within the HOA board, internal tensions reached a boiling point. Emergency meetings were convened behind closed doors as board members argued over how to respond to the incident. Some staunchly defended Karen's actions, arguing that rules were rules and that every infraction deserved punishment. But others, swayed by the overwhelming digital evidence and the impassioned public outcry, began questioning whether Karen's unilateral actions were in the best interests of the community. "We cannot allow personal vendettas to dictate our policies," One board member was quoted as saying in a leaked memo. The internal conflict within the board was palpable, and as more evidence emerged, it became increasingly clear that their authority was crumbling. I continued to update my digital dossier, uploading every new clip of the incident, every supportive comment, and every news snippet. My live updates, posted on community forums and social media platforms, serve as a rallying cry for residents who had grown tired of arbitrary fines and invasive enforcement. Neighbors began sharing stories of similar abuses by the HOA, a mishmash of petty grievances that had long festered in silence. The digital movement against HOA Karen Miller was gaining momentum, and every post reinforced the idea that property rights and personal dignity were non-negotiable. In response to the rising tide, Karen Miller attempted to regain control by issuing a statement through the HOA, claiming that her actions were in the best interests of community safety. However, her statement was immediately met with fierce rebuttals online. Residents decried her behavior as a gross misuse of power. The statement was quickly overshadowed by the viral video of Uncle Jack calmly instructing the fake officers to stand down, a moment that encapsulated the absurdity of the situation. The pressure on the HOA board was relentless. Digital petitions demanding reform of the HOA's enforcement policies began circulating, amassing tens of thousands of signatures. Local advocacy groups held impromptu forums and rallies, urging residents to come together to ensure that no one, no matter how self-righteous, could undermine the rights of a law enforcement officer or any homeowner through personal vendettas. As the final public hearing approached, the atmosphere in Cedar Grove was electric. Neighbors organized community meetings, prepared signs, and shared every piece of evidence they had gathered. Every shared video, every hashtag, and every comment built a sense of unity that was impossible to ignore. This was not merely a fight about one incident. It was a battle for the soul of our community and the principle that no one is above accountability. On the morning of the final hearing, the local community center was packed with determined residents. The energy was palpable. Every whispered conversation and every nod of agreement signified that Cedar Grove was ready for a decisive change. The digital dossier, now a comprehensive record of Karen's misdeeds and the heroic stand of Uncle Jack, was projected on large screens for all to see, creating an atmosphere of transparency and collective resolve. Residents braced themselves for what promised to be a watershed moment. The tension had built for months, and now, every argument on social media, every supportive comment from neighbors, and every trace of digital evidence converged into one unstoppable force. The battle lines were drawn. Either the HOA board would reaffirm the oppressive policies that had long dictated our lives, or they would embrace a new era of fairness, creativity, and respect for individual rights. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation that would force the community to choose between outdated authoritarianism and progressive empowerment. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp morning in the packed boardroom of the Cedar Grove Community Center. The room was filled with a sea of residents, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and HOA officials who had come together in a rare display of collective determination. At the podium, Councilwoman Olivia Sanchez, known for her unwavering commitment to fairness and transparency, took a deep breath and looked out over the expectant crowd. After carefully reviewing every piece of digital evidence, from a security footage capturing the attempted arrest of a county sheriff by fake HOA officers to the overwhelming testimonials of our residents, we have reached a conclusion that can no longer be denied. Councilwoman Sanchez began, her voice measured but firm. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller were not motivated by genuine concern for public order, but were driven solely by personal bias and a reckless abuse of power. Our community's rights, and particularly the dignity of our law enforcement officers, must be upheld at all costs. A heavy silence settled in the room, punctuated only by the soft rustling of papers. Sanchez continued, "Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines and sanctions imposed in relation to this incident. We will also launch a comprehensive disciplinary review of the procedures and practices that allowed such an outrageous act to occur. Moreover, we will institute new policies that protect the rights of our residents and ensure that our law enforcement officers are respected as the professionals they are. Today's decision is not about one individual dispute. It is a resounding declaration that Cedar Grove will no longer tolerate any abuse of power, no matter how trivial it may seem. Her words echoed powerfully throughout the boardroom. At that moment, a venerable community advocate, known for championing the causes of justice and individual rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand as one," he declared, his voice resonating through the silence. "No one in this community should ever be subjected to arbitrary enforcement by those who mistake petty personal grievances for public duty. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear indication that Cedar Grove values the principles of fairness, dignity, and accountability above all. We will not rest until every violation of our rights is met with swift and decisive action." His speech was met with thunderous applause, uniting everyone present in a powerful call for reform. Following this, a senior officer from the local law enforcement department presented the final dossier, a meticulously organized record of all the digital evidence, expert analyses, and eyewitness testimonies that irrefutably demonstrated that my uncle was indeed the county sheriff, and that his rights had been trampled upon by those who had no authority to act in such a manner. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt about the illegitimacy of the fake arrest attempt. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously recommended strict disciplinary measures against those involved in the scheme, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Sanchez concluded, "Let this resolution mark the beginning of a new era for Cedar Grove, a community where every resident's rights are sacrosanct, where public authority is exercised with transparency and integrity, and where no one is above the law." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will not allow personal vendettas to overshadow the principles of justice and decency. Together, we stand for a Cedar Grove that is defined by fairness, accountability, and respect for every individual. Her closing words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our fight for dignity and justice. In that transformative moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with renewed hope and determination, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to reconsider its practices, a decision that promised to forever reshape the governance of Cedar Grove. The days of arbitrary enforcement and unchecked abuse were over, and a future built on respect, transparency, and true accountability was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Grove experienced a profound transformation. News of the rescinded fines and the sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly throughout local media and social networks, igniting fervent debates on property rights, law enforcement dignity, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Grove" and "Community United for Justice," celebrated the decisive action taken to protect the rights and reputations of all residents. Hashtags like hashtag No More HOA, hashtag Justice for All, and hashtag Community First trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand firm against arbitrary abuse. Town hall meetings and public forums saw record attendance as residents gathered in large numbers to share their personal stories of harassment and to envision a future where individual rights were cherished. Neighbors, who once whispered about the overreach of those self-appointed enforcers, now spoke openly with pride about reclaiming their freedom and autonomy. "Our community is not a prison of petty rules," one resident proclaimed during a spirited forum. "It's a place where we can live freely, and every person's dignity must be respected." The atmosphere was charged with optimism and renewal, a promise that Cedar Grove would always prioritize fairness and accountability. Within the reformed HOA board and local law enforcement, swift and significant changes were implemented. Senior officials, spearheaded by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs focused on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the just management of community resources. Regular internal audits and enhanced disciplinary procedures were instituted to ensure that every complaint was rigorously scrutinized and that no resident, especially not a respected law enforcement officer, would again be subject to arbitrary enforcement. Our duty is to protect the rights of every citizen, Lieutenant Reed affirmed at a follow-up press conference, reinforcing the community's renewed dedication to justice. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized rapidly. They organized workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns to inform residents of their rights and to foster a culture that celebrated creative expression and individuality. When we stand together, we create an unbreakable bond that can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of oppression. A local activist said passionately at one meeting, urging the community to embrace a future defined by unity and respect. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly liberating. My decision to expose and retaliate against the fake arrest attempt on my uncle, a moment that underscored the absurdity of those who tried to usurp legitimate law enforcement authority, sparked a wildfire of change. Neighbors, long accustomed to silent obedience under oppressive rules, began sharing their own grievances, turning them into a powerful chorus of resistance. The digital evidence that captured that fateful moment became a symbolic rallying cry for every resident who believed in justice, freedom, and the unwavering right to live with dignity. Karen Miller, once the formidable enforcer of Cedar Grove's draconian policies, was now relegated to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one, regardless of how self-righteous they might appear, is above accountability when the community unites for justice. Her past transgressions, meticulously documented and shared widely, underscore the urgent need for reform and the perils of allowing personal biases to dictate public actions. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Grove, residents, officials, and advocates gathered under the soft light of a setting sun. A banner proclaiming unity, justice, and freedom was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a future where every individual's rights would be respected. Today, we celebrate not just a victory in one case, Councilwoman Sanchez proclaimed, but the dawn of a community that will forever stand against the tyranny of arbitrary power. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful testament to our renewed commitment to a fair and free Cedar Grove. As each new day dawned over our reclaimed neighborhood, the legacy of that tumultuous incident endured as a beacon of hope and progress. The story of how fake HOA officers tried to arrest my uncle, only to have his true identity, as the county sheriff revealed, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that justice, dignity, and freedom were worth fighting for. Every sunrise carried the promise that in Cedar Grove, truth and accountability would always prevail over tyrannical abuse of power. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our neighborhood, it carried with it the unyielding promise that Cedar Grove would forever be a place where freedom, integrity, and respect for individual dignity shone as brightly as the morning light.